Do you find expectations between the organization and camp directors about jobs isn't quite meshing these days?
This is CampHacker. Come find our show notes and our blog for camp directors and leaders at camphacker.tv.
Remember what sparked your passion for camp? Ultra Camp knows it's about the people, not the paperwork. That's why they built a platform to simplify your camp management. Learn more at ultracampmanagement.com/camphacker.
Why spend hours on your schedules only to find mistakes and missed activities for your campers? Let Camptivities do the heavy lifting and help you create the best schedules yet, without the mistakes and in less time. Come check out Camptivities, specifically designed for camps by camp people. Find out more at camptivities.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison from Go Camp Pro. Our show is brought to you by Ultra Camp, Camptivities, and the staff recruiting and retention email course that Beth and Matt and I have out right now. I'm a summer camp consultant specializing in getting parents to open, read, and act on your emails.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Hudson. I am the former camp director of a place called Camp Highlight. It's amazing. It's a sleepaway camp for kids who have LGBTQ parents. I am also a summer camp consultant, and I specialize in making sure that camps are safe for staff, family, and children, regardless of how they identify along gender, sexuality, religion, ability, or other axes.
Hi, my name is Dan Weir, and I'm a consultant in the summer camp industry, meaning that I help camps grow with Immersive First, and that might be helping them figure out how to get kids. That might be helping them get their next director. And then with Day Camp Community, that is also specifically for YMCA day camps, a service I provide, a subscription service, but happy to be here.
Hey y'all, I'm Esther. I'm the founder of CampHire. CampHire helps summer camps with their staffing and recruitment needs. We specialize in seasonal recruitment and executive searches.
That's awesome. Esther, I'm so glad to welcome you here. I wanted to catch up with Dan for just a second. Dan, it's wonderful to have you back on CampHacker.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be back.
This must be like episode 150 for you.
I definitely can't keep track. Definitely.
Yeah. I wonder if you could just touch a sec, Dan, on Day Camp Community. That sounds interesting work that you're doing. And I wonder if you could just give us a highlight of that work.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to share it is to share the story. So I switched from running a very large camp that was just focused on camp to working for an association Y that did many things, provided gym and swim, provided childcare. And one of the things that blew my mind was that I was watching our day camp directors go from running childcare on a Friday to running their day camp on a Monday. So we literally started a subscription service with just turnkey resources for them. So that way they're ready to go. And that's everything from, forms to education to literally savings with vendors. So you could get discounts on like your staff t-shirts through the service as well too. But it's just particularly crafted for YMCA day camps. And it's great. I have 42 camps that are participating. I'm sending out contracts today, and that number should be actually almost doubling by next week.
Wow.
So
Wow,
so things going well. It's going great. And Chris is actually one of the support team. There's quite a few folks that are supportive. It's not just me. It's a whole service in that way as well too. So super excited to be supporting folks. I really feel for people that have to go from running childcare to running camp, and it's stressful. It's really stressful.
Flip. Yeah. What's the URL for the Day Camp Community?
Yeah, it's just daycampcommunity.com. That's it. Super long, but yes. Yeah.
Glad to have you back, Dan.
Thank you.
Esther, how did you get connected to camp?
Yeah, so camp has been sort of in my blood since I was a camper.
Cool.
I went to a small camp in New Hampshire, shout out to Camp Yavna, and went there as a camper for many years. My mom actually worked there, so it was like a whole family affair. My two brothers were there. My dad came on the weekend. He'd be swimming the lake, and I'm like embarrassed that he's wearing like a small bathing suit. And, went back on staff, did all the things. Yeah. I also met my husband at camp, and my brother, who is a co-founder CampHire, also met his wife at camp. So it's just something that we, feel really close to. Since our time at camp, I've been working in the corporate world, working in education, but always felt like I wanted to give back and get back into the camp community since it gave me so much. And that's how CampHire was born. My brother and I were just throwing around ideas like, how can we get back into this? And directors very quickly, the pattern came that directors were like, we don't have enough staff.
Yep.
And this was even 5-6 years ago. And the problem is still here. And so we're like, all right, let's take a stab at it. Like, let's see what we can do to help support just like a small network of directors that we knew on the East Coast, in the Boston area. And we've just grown since then. Like, if you're in the camp world, that directors are trying to run these little cities and recruitment takes over and they can't do anything else. So the need is there. So that's how we grew. Now we do a seasonal business where we do nurses, chefs, and counselors. Those are our 3 categories leading up to summer. And it's a platform. So it's kind of self-serve, but we'll source all the candidates for you. And then we have executive recruitment. So we're doing full-time year-round staff. So right now we have a VP of operations we're helping to fill, executive directors, HR people, anyone who's doing that full-time year-round leadership staff, like whenever you have a gap. And we find that, a lot of time the people stay in these roles for a long time.
Yeah.
And when they do turn over, it's like, how do we do this? Right? We haven't done it for 10, 15 years. So much has changed since then. And it's a big effort to get the right person. So that's how I started. That's my love of camp and a little bit about what we do.
Amazing. And how do people find CampHire?
Yeah, CampHire.com.
Wonderful. All right.
Yeah.
So listeners, we will come back and remind you how to get in touch with Dan and Esther, but you can always go to camphacker.tv/podcast to find our show notes from today and find out how to get in touch with people. I want to take 1 sec and just remind people that we are grateful if you would give us an honest review on your podcast app, or if your podcast app doesn't give a chance to give reviews, go to ratethispodcast.com/camp, and then you can leave a CampHacker review there. The other thing that's pretty new as the technology has changed is when you're listening to us on a podcast app and not through a smart speaker, you can click on the show notes, and at the top of the show notes is a place that you can leave us a message. And if you have questions you want us to answer or responses to our shows, you can find that at the top of the show notes of every CampHacker episode, probably starting fall 2024. And let us know or let us know how we can help you, basically. I'm grateful to have you folks join us today, and I think it's a really interesting topic, and we specifically asked Esther to come because of this topic. But Dan, I wonder if you could introduce it for us, please.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to introduce it is to tell people about the WhatsApp chat we were having recently. So I'm conducting 2 searches at the moment, and meaning for executive level leadership. And it's a very funny marketplace right now, as well as texting Travis. And what I mean by marketplace, and it's weird to frame recruiting and marketplace, but it's kind of the easiest way to kind of summarize it, that everybody is kind of hoping for the diamond in the rough, meaning that you have the boards or owners or CEOs that are searching for a director that will put in years, but also have hunger. And sometimes there's a juxtaposition with that, right? And then we have applicants that want to work for an organization that frankly won't burn them out and will provide them resources. And it's interesting because Esther will attest to this. Like when we have these conversations with both sides of the aisle, both sides of the party, like both want the best for each other, but sometimes there's this almost gap in language. And, I know we both kind of like take on this role of like, no, I think you should really pitch it this way, or you should really kind of talk about what that job title really means, and really getting to the nitty gritty of it. But it's just fascinating to kind of watch folks navigate. On top of it, I'm seeing a drastic amount of people apply for positions. Like, the one I just most recently posted, the applicants becoming in fast and furious, and then qualified too. So it's like a very fascinating moment in our industry of people looking for their next opportunity, but also being very cautious of it as well. That's kind of was the text we had back and forth. And
yeah. Esther, what have those conversations felt like to you? I mean, I'm specifically thinking about the gap, and of course, I want to get to how we close that gap, but what have they been like for you?
Yeah, well, I want to reflect a little bit on Dan's point that he mentioned that there's like this diamond in the rough, and that usually the camp side is really pushing for someone to sort of play into so many different skills needed in a camp director. And also, Aaron's my co-founder and brother. We hear so much from initial calls with camp directors that, we're really looking for someone who's going to be here for the next 10 to 15 years. We want someone who wants to find their next family home,
Right.
camp family home. And at first you're like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like everyone wants to hire the right person for longevity. And Aaron and I push back real hard. And we say, that is not an expectation that you can put on someone, for them to pick a job for 10 years. Someone can have a baby. They could move away. Their parent could get sick. It could just straight up not work out. And I think specific to this camp industry where there's like a lot of legacy and a lot of like loyalty to the camp you went to, the camp you work at, we actually really encourage camps to not think that way. That you can't put on a job description that you want you here for 15 years. If you are hired to work, as a recruiter at a general company, no one says, well, are you going to be here for 20 years? Otherwise, we're not going to hire you. And it's kind of an eye-opening conversation we have with camps because it's truly a qualification that camps are looking for. And we don't think that it is the right way to analyze a candidate for that specific role. So that's the first thing that we really try to like change that perspective of like, you need to look for the right person now. And who knows how long they're going to be there. We all hope you find the right person the first time, but that it's not something that we should really include as a way of analyzing or, what we're really looking for. So that was the first piece. And then, the second piece on really thinking about, what does the camp want and what does the applicant want? One of the first things that we do with a new client, so someone that we're supporting a search for, is we do a working session to help analyze their current job description and really figure out what are the core competencies they want for the role. And we try to narrow that down to 4. And all the camp directors out there who might be listening, it's like, what, 4? But they need to talk to parents and they need to do marketing and they need to recruit for new staff and they need to recruit new campers and they need to help with the maintenance and the list goes on. So we really think it's true. But first of all, your job description can't be that long. Second of all, not everyone's going to be good at all those things. What are the 4 pillars that are going to be core to this role that you really need in order for this person to start on day one? Like they can't learn it. They need to have it. And through that working session with them, we really pick apart and categorize things. And then you very quickly, the bottom of the list, things that you learn that you can teach almost come off of the resume entirely. And we don't analyze for that. So that's sort of that juxtaposition of we want everyone, we want diamonds in the rough versus, getting candidates to really understand what they're applying for. The job descriptions that are super long and include everything, it's almost like saying nothing because they just run through it and they're like, okay, I guess I'll apply. So that's something that we try to do on our end, and we find it really helps with everything from understanding the role itself to analyzing candidates and having it being like a really fair recruitment process.
And it also that I love that focus. I'm so happy that you make camps do that because we talked a couple episodes, Chris and I, about the value of delegating, and that'd be one of the first 4 things on my list for a new hire.
I listened to that one.
You need to be better at not plunging toilets, not lifeguarding on a Saturday, and not plowing snow blowing your driveway. Yeah, so that's awesome. What do you think, Chris?
I love what you're saying, Esther, because I find, especially on the rare occasions when I will like look at listings for jobs, people tend to list every single quality that they want to the point where 2 things happen. One, people who don't have all those things apply anyway, which then puts you in the uncomfortable position where it's like, now you have to do all the work that you were hoping the listing would do, which was to delimit people, right? So that's the first, but that is the thing, that people just apply willy-nilly. And so it just creates a lot more work on the back end. So I love that idea of like distilling it down to 4 things. The other thing I was thinking while both of you were talking, Dan and Esther, is I wonder, just as time marches on and the industry has changed, like the expectations that people have for people applying for a camp director job, I think are really interesting because, well, for instance, we want someone to stay for 10 or 15 years. Everybody wants to hire a camp director and have there be continuity, not just for a year or 2, but for a decade or more. When we stop to really think about that in an employment sort of mindset, that's wild, hot, and crazy. It's wild, hot, and crazy to put out a job and be like, okay, so are you good through 2034? Like, that's insane. But yet it's somehow an expectation that we have. And I don't really have much more to say about that. It's just that struck me as something I want to think about more. Why do people have this expectation that you need to hang on to this job for 10 years? That's wild, hot, and crazy.
So and it's very industry specific.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's so funny. So like I was having a conversation with a CEO who's hiring their camp director, exec director underneath them. And it's so funny because the language is so different amongst every organization. And so they said to me, we really want somebody to stay there for a while. And I understood their sentiment because, the longer a director stays, the higher the camper enrollment goes, the higher the quality goes, right? Like there is correlations to that. My response to them was, sure, but you recognize you have a responsibility to take care of this person so they're going to stay, right? Like you understand that this is not like, you can't just wish this.
Just
that
on
you
them
actually,
also.
Yeah, exactly. Like you have to provide them with benefits for their family that you make them want to stay. You have to provide them with housing that fits their lifestyle, professional development. Like if you're investing in them, these type of people might stay. But like if they don't feel invested in it, and it was a very funny moment. And this is like prior to getting into the weeds of actually running the recruitment process for them. It's a frank conversation that boards need to have as well too. I actually find a tremendous amount of the work that we do in Immersive First is board education, really explaining how a camp works and what to realistically expect out of your executive director, camp director, and for the privately owned camps that are listening to this, you might not understand this kind of concept, but like to have a group of people overseeing you that are professionals in other domains but don't necessarily know the camp landscape, it's challenging, and there has to be education for folks.
In both directions. Well, and I mean, from a camp owner's perspective, if they're hiring somebody, I mean, that's usually if it's a family-run camp, they will have had generations do it, and now they're at a point where somebody's kids don't want to do it, and they bring in an outside director or bring in somebody to be the director, but not... So that's their perspective. Like we've had somebody direct for 20 years and they've got to know us, and it's obviously very valuable to parents because there's a lot of trust that builds, etc. But setting up a person to do well in this job and therefore saving yourself the long-term energy of having to go through a whole procedure and hiring again and again is so important. And so I get that this is my very Canadian perspective on this, but we have a friend who is having a C-section today and is expected to be a camp director on the 1st of February.
Oh my gosh.
What?
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that person for listening. Yeah. That's not right.
And yeah, it just makes me want to throttle the camp board. And I mean, there's lots of little pockets of camp where they are still holding on to just that expectation that you're doing it for the good of the kids. And so therefore we can dump all this on you. But for me, part of my perspective on this is the same. When we were camp directing, I mean, partly comes out of people saying, you must love working with kids. And I'd say, I don't really. And they'd be surprised about that because my answer is, I really like working with staff. And frankly, my job is not to work with kids. And a board is not, their job is not to set up for all these things. Their job is to create a supportive environment for one leader who can then support down the line, et cetera.
Exactly.
What you're saying reminds me a lot of this buzzword, which is the candidate experience.
Yeah.
So I come from a background doing recruitment at Google, at Etsy, with nonprofits, some of these big tech companies where they have this down pat. And, part of my mission at CampHire personally is to bring that over more to the camp industry because the candidate experience matters. And what is a candidate experience? It's how they feel throughout this process. And then it involves exactly what you're saying. Like when someone says, what are the benefits? What's the maternity leave? What's the living situation? The answer needs to be like, here are the benefits and here's the maternity leave versus like, oh, we don't really have a package.
Oh, we'll figure it out later. Yeah.
We'll give you a stipend or, it's
we'll let you customize it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Which means like it'll fall to the side. We won't get there.
Exactly.
So I had an awesome candidate, finalist for a role, and she had a young child. And she was asked to move to camp, which is in a pretty rural area.
Yeah.
And in the end, she said, I don't feel comfortable sending my young kid to that school district. And the camp was not able to be flexible about where they lived, whether she does some remote work or she lives outside of the small rural area. And they lost her, right? And she had choice. So there's also this thing that candidates, really good candidates, have choice. There becomes a flip that I think a lot of industries don't recognize, or camp industry doesn't recognize, is that we often feel like the candidates that we're interviewing, we could have the pick, right? They really want us. They want to be our camp director. And then there's this switch, right? Where it's like, no, actually, like, you really need to understand at some point that they're going to have the choice. They're going to have options, and we need to move fast, be flexible, and understand the candidate experience really matters. Our communication matters. Having benefits, having flexibility matters. And I think another piece of that, which is the candidate experience and the package, is this location piece. So, we tend to think that providing housing is a perk. I think it's the complete opposite. Nobody wants to move to middle
Dig
of
into that,
nowhere.
please.
Yeah.
Can we talk about it? Can we talk about this,
Wisconsin.
please?
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about that.
It is so industry nuanced that a job that you accept also encompasses your dogs and your spouse and your kids and your house and your car. And so it's not a perk to ask someone to move to the middle of nowhere. So it should be taken off of the package. It's not part of a comp package.
Exactly.
And can we be more flexible and offer remote work? I was working with another camp, and they really wanted this person to be at camp. They did not, in the end. They allowed this person to be more remote. And my question to them is, why? Why do you want them to be on campus? And they said, well, if no one's there could be something with maintenance. There could be something where, we just need someone on campus to be the person just in case. And I said, well, don't you have a maintenance director? And they said, yes. I said, don't they live on campus? And they said, yes. So I said, this person doesn't need to live there.
Thank you.
We landed on a medium where they needed to be within 2 hours driving distance of camp, but that also reached major cities. So really thinking of the candidate experience and getting rid of those barriers so that you can really attract top talent. The moment you put remote during the off season, immediately you're getting more talent.
100%.
Because it's very unique to our
100%.
industry. And if you can be flexible in that way, you will get top talent. And you will win out if they are competing, if you have competitors that person's interviewing other places.
100%. Yes.
1,000,000,000%. The residence requirement should be something you apologize for, not proudly advertise, because I think that's really what keeps a lot of people away from it. I went to this camp once in the middle of, I don't even know, it was like Mosquito Forest, Minnesota, I think. And
sounds romantic.
Yeah. I mean, it was the wrong season. Like, they were like this big and they were like stinging the hell out of you. But, I spoke to the camp director, and the camp director's wife. The camp director's wife was like, yeah, I'm not even from here. She just got this job, and now I live in the middle of Mosquito Forest, Minnesota. And I was thinking, oh my God, the way I would never. But what you're saying is true. Like, how many times have I heard, yes, we need the camp director to live here. Tell me why. Exactly the same thing. Maintenance issues. Don't you have a maintenance person? Yeah, but the camp director should be involved. Tell me more. How should the camp director be involved in a maintenance issue when you have a maintenance director? Like, what can they do if they're on site versus if they just get an email? And then everyone's like, blank, blank, blank. I haven't thought about it. There is something about this industry where we expect people to accept positions as if it's a lifestyle/cult.
Mm-hmm.
And while that might be magical and romantic to a certain degree, like, the current economics of this situation just don't lend themselves to advertising ourselves as, hey, come on in. We need you to be here for a decade, and you need to completely subsume your personality to what we're doing here. I just think that's too much to ask anyone nowadays.
And as Esther said, your spouse has to do that too, and your dog has to do that too.
Your dogs and your family has to be okay with you moving to the woods.
And I don't think people recognize, when we talk about the lifestyle aspect of it, how much to the outside person that gap is, right? Because I'll talk to some folks that are super qualified and will look at a job description and be like, I would love to switch industries into this. And then in the Canada experience, exactly what Esther is describing, I'll say to them, like, you are qualified. You could be a fantastic fundraising executive director that this organization needs. I just want you to also recognize that this org really wants you to actually live on site during this time period and this time period, is that a lifestyle commitment you're able to make? And it's exactly that. I've watched good talent walk out the door because they can't commit, and money's the second that follows that, right? Like
Absolutely.
the salaries, Esther and I talk about this all the time, that like there's a certain threshold where people can't live on anymore. I talked to a really phenomenal program director last week, and she was just in tears saying, I can't live on this low of a salary anymore. It's not fair to the people around me. It's not even fair to myself, but it's not even fair to the people around me. And we need to really be honest and realistic about the compensation that comes with that. And I know that's controversial because every org has different resources and how they're set up, and the rising cost of insurance and other things, but it's just the compensation needs to match where people are at. And it's right now I hear these three things immediately from people. What's the salary? If it's not posted, I wouldn't post a job this day if it doesn't have the salary on it. What's the housing / location? And the third is, what's the culture / who's my boss? Those are the three things that an applicant is interviewing the camp on. They're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. Like it happens so much that it's almost infuriating that we can't get past this moment,
Yeah.
How do
it's
we?
gotta be it's gotta be 6 figures. And we can't.
Who can afford that? I agree, but then who can afford that?
I think there are sacrifices to make other places for sure. But if you're talking about someone who you want to stay here for a long time and uproot their lives, like you have to pay 6 figures. There are so many camps that are paying less, and I understand there are many reasons why. But if you're on the ACA, email list that gives you, the open roles, the ones at the 50 and the 60K mark, they're there the next email that comes around next month,
Correct.
right? And the ones that can pay 6 figures, I understand that it's asking a lot, but what else to invest in than your number one top leader of this camp?
Correct.
I think there are sacrifices to make other places, and it's got to be 6 figures to be successful.
Yeah. And it's hard, right?
It's so hard, Esther. Oh my God.
So Chris, hard. I feel like when we talk about the word hard, yesterday I was doing a webinar with Jack Shaw, and he kept saying people need to work harder, and I had to pause him because people heard the word harder, and it was like, and I'm like, Jack, I don't think Jack's saying is work more hours. That's not what he's saying. I think what he's saying harder, he's saying we might have to let go of some responsibilities. We might have to leverage technology better. Those are two areas where I watch a lot of camps could have a much better efficiency and flow and just frankly process and ultimately save money that can then go to a more professional staff, a better compensated professional staff. Sorry, just to rephrase that. But it's hard. That's a hard examination. Often you need a third party to kind of come in and help you navigate that type of conversation. It's not just for a board and an ED or some alumni. Like you do need to be kind of challenged to think differently. And the greatest sin of our industry is that that's how we've always done it, is the mindset I hear way too much. All four of us, I know we hear that all the time. We constantly talk about breaking that. So it's fascinating. But like to get a really substantial quality applicant, depending on where you are in the US, you got to get close to 6 figures. Like it is a truth. And that is a hard reality. Like I volunteer for a nonprofit for a bereavement camp nearby, and they're literally rubbing 2 nickels together to get by every day. And it's a lot of volunteer work. And that's a completely different type of camp I'm talking about compared to the year-round operation with a property
I mean, I see your frustrated face, Chris, and I get it. I mean, I really do. I will say that we post jobs for free on Tuesdays to our email list, and I have had to say no to camps because I'm not going to put on my email list that you're offering less than $40,000 to do this job. And it's like what people expect, again, what organizations expect. Now, you're going to say it well in just a second, I know, Chris, but I understand that having come from running nonprofits that run camps, I understand that constant money thing. And I agree with Esther. We have to be smart about that. We have to charge more and figure out how to scholarship more. One thing that's been my newer perspective on this, because of some of the work that we're doing, is we are taking some of just the trivial garbage off of your own camp staff's plates by helping set up systems to do that. It's a lot of AI implementation, but if we can, sometimes we're saving, 2.5 is pretty high. Let's say 1.5 days a week of people's work just getting stuff off their plate that then will allow the camp to make more money, better recruiting, all those things, because they're not stuck in those little things that take up so much time. And maybe that's a way to reduce expenses in a way. Obviously that's self-serving because that's what I do for a living.
Every year, it's the same thing. Lots of hours spent working on the daily schedules, only for there to be mistakes, missed activities, and lots of stress. Why is it so difficult? There's got to be a better way. And there is. CampTivities, an activity scheduler made specifically for camps. Group scheduling or camper scheduling, we've got you covered. Different day schedules, no problem. Auto scheduling, elective scheduling, batch scheduling. Schedule the way that works for your camp. With over 60 reports, you'll be able to see the data easily. When a parent calls and says, my camper didn't get an activity week 1, pull up the group activity tracker and see exactly when that activity was scheduled all summer long. Modernize the way you do activity scheduling. Make it easier to collaborate with team members. Get rid of the mistakes and make sure your campers are getting to all of your activities. We'd love to show you the next big thing in camp. Now's the time to find a better way to schedule this summer. Don't wait. Next summer will be here before you know it. Let us help you get away from your desk and back out in camp. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat.
Exclusive to CampHacker listeners. Generate fresh ideas for activities, staff training, marketing campaigns, and more with UltraCamp's plug-and-play AI prompt guide. Download it for free at ultracampmanagement.com/CampHacker. Why struggle with multiple systems when one can do it all? UltraCamp offers a platform that simplifies your work by combining all aspects of camp management into one seamless solution. UltraCamp brings everything you need into one easy-to-use platform. Plan schedules and activities with just a few clicks. Register and track campers easily organize, schedule, and automate your communications. Manage payments and donations seamlessly. Get back to what you love. UltraCamp helps you spend less time on admin tasks and more time creating unforgettable camp experiences. Ready to see if UltraCamp is the perfect fit? Schedule your free personalized demo at ultracampmanagement.com/CampHacker. Chris, go.
Well, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. As you know, I love highfalutin ideals. I love theoretical situations, especially when it comes to camp and making it better. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Go for it. Lean in.
But then rubber hits the road. And as much as I love the idea of people offering camp directors $100,000+, the reality of the situation encroaches. Now, Travis, we've had multiple episodes on the challenges that camps are going to have to face in the next 5 to 10 years, right? On the staff side, for sure, on the environmental side, on the marketing side, there are so many things that just us as hosts of this podcast have asked camp directors to do. We've asked camps to do so much. And now here we are being like, well, you've got to start by paying your camp directors 20-30% more than you are already paying them. That is just going to be How do we, yes, thank you, Esther.
Yeah.
How do we make this attractive to people? How do we describe the importance of this without necessarily turning people off to the idea? Because I bet people listening to this right now are like, there's no possible way. Okay, I'll move on to the next episode. So what do we say to them?
Yeah. So here's what it is. I think identifying the roadblocks of why you're not getting the qualified candidates that you want, and then figuring out which roadblock that you can change or have control over. And I can tell you what those roadblocks usually are. We've already discussed them. Number 1 is salary. Number 2 is expectations of living. And number 3 is job expectations. Yes. Right. So we'll often go back to a client and be like, we are getting candidates that are walking after the first conversation that are really qualified. Here's why. Or we're getting applicants and they're not qualified for the role, right? These are probably people I wouldn't put in front of you. So which of those three can we bend on? Can you think about it being a remote role, right? Great. Then we've knocked out one of those three, right? Instead of having it be, also in charge of marketing, can you hire a third-party marketing company that's probably not that expensive and you can do it seasonally and then not expect this person to have all these marketing skills, right? So like the job expectations could change a little bit. Or is it salary? Those are usually the three roadblocks that we see. If you're like salary cannot budge, we're at our absolute top, like 65, 75K is where we're at. How can you change the other two?
Exactly.
Go back to market, see what you get.
Exactly. Yeah. And allow for them, like if, let's think about the applicant, right? Like, let's say the household applicant knows I need to get close to 6 figures, right? And the salary's at 60, 70K. That's okay if that person then is able to take on additional work. Like there's plenty of other camp directors, camp owners, or execs that do some consulting on the side, right? So like there's just, it all goes back to the job responsibilities that correlate to it. When I'm consciously saying 6 figures, I'm saying to the full-time living your job lifestyle person. I'm not talking about Paul Rubin, the executive director for Camp Bereavement, the Camp Good Morning that I volunteer with, that he only runs a few weeks of camp and he also is a social worker and so like he runs the camp. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to that full-time person, right? So like, but it's hard. It's really, I mean, I have conversation after conversation with a qualified person that can't afford to live on the salary. That's where the sentiment comes from it,
popped into my mind is recently I was working with a camp that was in a similar situation to this, where they're like, we are at our top budget. We want this candidate. I knew the candidate's expectations, right? I ask, what's your expectation? And if it's too high, I'll bring it back. We'll have a conversation about it. In the end, they worked out, part of the package was incentivized. So if they recruit a certain so if there's by the end of their first year, exactly. It could be camper recruitment growth. It could be a lot of different ways that you can measure growth, and they get a bonus if they hit those numbers. I actually think the numbers were high. I'm not sure this person will hit those numbers within their first year, but they'll reevaluate. Maybe they'll hit them the second year. And that gives camp some leeway of, I don't have to give this money right now. And it motivates that person to really work for it. And I would assume it needs to be in reach, right? Eventually they're going to get that bonus. So that's another alternative to working in the attractiveness of a higher salary without giving it in base.
Yes. Yeah. That's 100% a great pathway. 100%.
And I also think not really the norm, right? Like totally. Again, the industry norm in any other industry is that there is a bonus incentivized.
The other, I mean, that idea of the incentivization and a bonus and stuff, I have talked with boards about that have absolutely lost their minds. No, that's not how camp runs.
Yes.
Like that's how the rest of the world runs. And they're like, no, they should be doing it just because because of their big hearts. So that's a constant problem that I've seen many times. The other thing, this is a long theme. I've been saying this since Dan and I started the show 15 years ago, that we as an industry do not value time properly. We don't understand what time is worth to us. We don't understand, the value of that exec's hour. We get them doing stupid things like lifeguarding. And as a board, especially with volunteers, it's kind of the same thing. So it doesn't cost actual camp, the camp operations. It doesn't cost you a lot of money if you have volunteers running a recruitment thing. It obviously costs you if you're bringing in a professional who has the contacts and the skills and the language that Esther's explaining in her work, and Dan has done as well. That is an expense. But the board isn't realizing how much it hurts camp to not have a year-round leader, how much it's costing camp in the perception with parents and therefore sales by not having a year-round leader, or having to turn around and do a whole procedure 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year, search again in 2 years because you have undervalued the staff, you haven't set them up for success, you haven't done all these things. Like, we just miss that. This costs camp not to have a person in this spot.
Exactly.
Because we're just seeing, another $20,000. So that's a frustration of mine too, but that's consistent. I just hope that the kind of people that listen to CampHacker are thinking those things through, because I've been singing about it for so long.
We think certainly agreed, but I think it also comes through in the interview process more than people might realize in that like this value of time and boards. Like we've talked about boards, it seems like it's come up a lot. We've done a lot of work with boards. We've built boards, we've recruited and built boards for camps. We've worked with boards for hiring. And boards can be amazing. They can be super helpful and involved, or they're actually slowing down the process and making more rounds of interviews per se. So thinking of that time piece, right? So a candidate going through 6 rounds of interviews with every single person on the board and a parent and just all the people, it's the board's time and it's the candidate's time. It's not a great candidate experience. So we push a lot. We say, have all the decision makers in the room, 1 or 2 rounds, have all the decision makers ready to go. And when you're working with the board, that's a lot of decision makers. But thinking of a candidate's time and the board's time, how can you do that so the candidate experience is really streamlined, right? So that might mean half the board isn't interviewing and they just want to look at notes. It might mean that there's 2 interviewers on one, right? So 2 people hosting and 1 person interviewing. And that also does translate to like what the candidate will feel when they're in the job, right? Are you valuing my time? Are you just throwing another round in there because you're not sure? Are people making decisions effectively? So that is time. What you're saying, like the value of time coming through on the very, very top of the funnel, which is just starting to interview. And it does sort of start that thought process for the candidate also if they were to accept this job. So a little twist on what you were saying, but I think
you're totally right. I mean, my bigger point of this is that camp has undervalued labor for a century because we've been allowed to not value the time and money of that person. And this is the symptomatic outcome of that, is this this gap between realistic expectations of hiring in 2025 and the history of summer camp, where
it goes back to the root of camp, right? Like camp was tied to churches and pastors taking kids into the woods. Well, that was a lifestyle choice, right? So it's tied into the initial start of camp.
Can I just say, and this is a whole nother episode, so maybe we'll do this, Travis, but so much of my work is people asking me, they don't necessarily ask for this, but how do I professionalize what I'm doing here? Right? Esther, you made the point that like the things that we ask people to do, the interview rounds themselves, if that was in a corporate environment, it'd be for a job that pays $200K. That many touch points, like it would be a job that pays $200K. And we're asking people to do it for $70,000 a year, and you have to move to the middle of the swamp. Listen, I'm always big for this, but like it's no secret that the history of camp is not great. It's really not where it started. Its intended goals, the people it excluded, and why. It's not great. Perhaps now, 100+ years later, maybe now's the time to start from the bottom up, thinking about what we're requiring from people, what our expectation is, what the service it is that we are providing, and where that exists in the constellation of childcare and youth development. First of all, childcare is consistently and historically devalued, which is the first hurdle. But I think the other hurdle are these ideas that we have around a lifestyle position or a cult membership, which is how sometimes people sell camps to get people in. Oh, it's great. You'll meet your family. You'll meet your friends. I have family and I have enough friends. What I need is a job, right? What I need is a job where I feel like I'm doing good work and that I am being effective and efficient. And so again, it's Chris Hudson's 7 millionth call for let's break this down and start from the bottom up and just remake camping.
I love what you said when you were like, I have a job.
Let's be real. Let's be real.
I need a job. It's a really good, real way to put it. Yeah. I mean, I'll say one more thing is that, and I want to make people feel like this is an impossible feat, right? To find the next executive director. It is very possible. There are a ton of talented people that are looking to be in camp and do want this next phase of their life to be a home. It's just having, small changes in the mindset and expectations of what you expect from a candidate. It's totally doable. There's a lot of amazing talent out there. Finding them is a real skill. Finding the right people is a real skill. And I'll just leave you with a piece of data that the best time to post an interview and open a search is between October and January. So if you are thinking of, you might have a gap coming up next year, or you have a gap now, you're a little bit behind, get on it. You can still fill them, but the best, like the market shows that the number of applicants for every camp per camp job is between October and January. So just something to think about. That's when you should hit the market. It's the hottest and you'll have the most candidates applying to your roles.
Yeah. And it's funny too when we talk about as a marketplace, because it really is. Like at the end of the day, like there's a supply of folks. One thing I wanted to make sure I emphasized, and Esther touched on it earlier, was just so much with the candidate experience. Communication is everything. On both sides, the camp, the org, you communicating to the applicant effectively, clearly, and warmly is everything. I can't tell you that is how you keep people from dropping out. And this is not just year-round hiring, this is summer hiring as well too. Like there's some huge gaps in how we're communicating to people, and people need to leverage. This is where you can save time, is leverage the CRM technology as well too for that. So that's on the org side. Tell
us what CRM is, Dan, please.
Yeah, so HubSpot, Salesforce, Eric Wittenberg's Camper Machine, those are great technologies to help you. And now there's a whole nother world with hiring of an application tracking system, ATSs, which have that baked in. That's like a whole nother hour, 2 hours on dissecting that.
But I'll throw out real quick, Jazz HR, extremely affordable, very user-friendly.
Yes.
So great for camps.
Great plug. Yeah. Yeah. And what the work Esther and Aaron are doing is phenomenal as well too, with the seasonal hiring as well, like with what they're providing. So there's that. And then the on the applicant side, I've watched applicants rise in the process because they communicate well. Right. So like if you're communicating warmly and you really want a job and you show you want that job on a warm communication, I've watched people that frankly were a little less qualified get into the finalist pool because they showed hunger. And so communication's everything in this relationship. And it can be exhausting when you're applying for other jobs and you don't hear back. And like, I get that, but like, you can feel like it's like a bottomless pit. But like, I've watched really great people just show how committed they were in the process, and they end up with the job sometimes. It's an easy way to show and overcome the gap you might have in knowledge or skills.
Well, thank you to the three of you for sharing your wisdom. And as usual, folks, if you have questions or follow-up, as I said, you can go to your app and send me a message. You can email me, travis@gocamp.pro, and I can pass on questions. And we'll say at the end of the show how you can get in touch with each person directly and or hire them. You should hire all three of these people, and your camp would be better by next Tuesday. This Chris, you're catching. Chris, the Chris hyperbole is catching. I want to. This all means that we're on to our tool of the week.
Tool of the week.
For those of you who are joining us because you have followed Dan or Esther here, Dan back and Esther here for the first time, Tool of the Week is something that each panelist brings to help you become a better camp director. I was explaining to Esther Tool of the Week, and I have said the budget for this is often zero, but has been as high as $85,000. So it is.
What was $85,000? What was $85,000?
Tractor.
The tractor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dan, I would like you to go first, please.
Yeah. I'm just searching to make sure I get the actual pricing. So it's not $85,000 as I talk to people. Looks like it is $12 a month. It has saved me a lot of headaches. I would refer you to Grammarly, the app. So Grammarly is AI that you can use on your computer. But what I really love using it and why I think it's worth the money is that you put the app on your phone, regardless of, Samsung or Apple, and then it can help you basically fix up your text. So I text like a madman, meaning that like I send fragment sentences without periods and it just like go. And that is not really helpful when I'm trying to be professional with clients and applicants and everything in between. So Grammarly has really helped. You put the keyboard and it can kind of reshuffle your words a little bit, help you make sure that you're clearly communicating. Just highly recommend it. $12 a month, it looks like. So not $85,000.
I will.
What a
I'll
deal.
double down on this one. It is so good, and it has helped me with different wording, like simplify this in my email or make this more clear. And the new update recently, especially on my computer, I haven't noticed on my phone yet, but that will just offer you such good suggestions for rewriting. It's been
incredible.
amazing.
Yeah, 100% worth
I
it.
use it on my computer daily, but I don't use it on my phone. So I'm going to put it on my phone.
Yeah. Right on. Excellent. Chris, what's your tool of the week?
Okay, so if you listen to the show, I have recommended every single thing that I've ever bought and that I own, except for this one thing that I overlooked, which literally made my life as a camp director way, way better. And it's such a no-brainer. It's honestly just a battery-powered lamp. And let me explain. Like at our cabins at our camp, there's one big, gross overhead fluorescent light. And all of the admin sleeps in the same place, and we all have to have the same bedtime because once the light goes off, you can't see nothing. And all the wall plugs, I don't know what's the situation where you are, but there's printers, there's laminators, there's computers. There's no space for anything. And so this sounds so crazy because it's such an obvious solution. Having one of those battery-powered lamps that are really popular at restaurants, at least in New York right now, like you just touch them and they turn on. This changed my life. I've been able, listen, and I don't encourage this, but I was able to continue working past 1 a.m. in my bunk. And I do not, that's a boundary issue. Do not do that. But let's say I was able to continue reading in my bunk after 1 a.m. Let's just say
Better
that.
to relax and get ready to sleep and look after campers the next month.
The ones that I bought are pretty expensive, but I think you can find them way, way cheaper. And like, there's a million different versions of this. It's such a simple fix. Check it out.
Listen, this is exactly why Tool of the Week was invented, for these little things. Like, you probably haven't thought of this, but I found it and I was so excited.
The way it took me 28 years of being on a campus to figure this out is embarrassing, and I apologize.
Did you not have headlamps?
We had headlamps, but like a headlamp when it's pitch black and it's on your head and you're in your bunk, isn't the thing.
Yeah, it's very bright. Yeah,
it's not the zhuzh you're looking for.
Sure.
Yeah.
Zhuzh indeed. Okay. Esther, I'm going to give you the last word. So I'm going to talk about a book that I received this week by a friend of mine that he and I both work for Seth Godin and Seth's Alt MBA program. His name is Connor McCarthy. I wish that there was an audio version of this because Connor's from Dublin and has a wonderful accent. But it is called The Unstuck Book, and my Zoom thing's doing weird. The Unstuck Book by Connor McCarthy, Connor with one N. Small questions, big shifts, get things done. So it's a one-page, just based on my life experiences, I would almost call this a one-page meditation on leadership. So it's a question and some ways to think things through. And so he has stuff on the right way to think about marketing, sales and why people buy, thinking about the customer first, developing a growth mindset, being present with your staff. Like, great little pieces that make you think, and I highly recommend it. So that's The Unstuck Book by Connor McCarthy, available. We try not to do too many Amazon links, but it's available. It's a self-published, so it's through Amazon. You can find those links in a second. Esther, what's your tool?
Yeah, so mine's free.
Winner.
So
okay, Esther. Okay, we get
free,
it. We
but
get
it's very
it.
valuable. But it's very valuable.
The three of us have expensive tastes. We get it.
All right. I can do expensive. I got tools. We got tools.
This is practical. I love it.
Cost.
Yeah.
All right. If you are posting a job on Indeed, so you have an Indeed account and you're not applying to job, right? You're the one who posted the job. In every Indeed account on the left side, there's like a menu bar that's always open. And one of those options, it's second from the bottom, is called Analytics. Nobody goes there except for me and Aaron, who live in there. If you hover over Analytics, there's a bunch of options. And one of the options is Analytics Overview. What you can do in that tool is analyze how your job is posting compared to others. You can do things like type in camp director as the title in California. What is the average salary? And it will pull up the data over what is the average salary, and you can see where you're sitting in it. You can pull up analytics on keywords. So for example, when we're doing seasonal, we play with words like cabin counselor and bunk counselor and bunk lead, because it can tell you what people are searching. So if you don't have the word camp counselor, you're doing cabin lead, you're missing people. And the only way to really figure that out very quickly, it's all there for you. You don't even have to like search anything. You just put in camp counselor and it's going to tell you those, it'll give you the percentage of what are the keywords. Other things we use it for is it will tell you the average applicants per job posting, per time of year, per month. And it gets nitty gritty, but you don't have to go nitty gritty. You can keep it really surface level. I would recommend just going into that tool before you post a role. Just click around camp director, camp counselor, whatever it might be. Learn a little bit about what's out there in the market and have it reflect on what you post. It's such a valuable tool. Of course, it's our business, so we need to be doing those things, but it is simple enough that you could just spend 15 minutes doing on it before you post a role and learn a lot.
And save yourself so much time.
So much time and improve so much in such a little amount of effort.
Yeah, that's amazing. Esther, I'm giving you a second tool because I've written down for Matt to put in Jazz HR as your second tool.
Yes.
So I appreciate that. Listen, I would think we would be remiss because it's one of those things, I don't know why people don't know this, but you should be looking on Glassdoor.com for your camp name every month. For lots of people don't know what Glassdoor is. It is a place where people can rate their place of employment and write about it, and they can do it anonymously. And so, you should just know already, but when you're getting into hiring season, you need to be in there all of the time because furthermore, places that I think, this is a repeat many times, you should be a member of the r/summer camp subreddit on Reddit.
Yes.
Because the unbelievable stories that we see on there from camps, it's mostly camp staff in there.
Yeah.
So you can get a perspective on how just the experiences that people have had working at camps that infuriate me, but you should know.
But also there are adorable questions, first time staff. Like my first time at camp, I don't know what to wear. And I'm like, clothes.
Yep. Well, listen, this has been a wonderful discussion. I am super grateful to the three of you for dropping so many truth bombs on this. Chris, if people want to get in touch with you, follow up, or hire you to do the awesome things that you talked about in your introduction, how do they do that?
Check with your friends because we're all hanging out without you. No, really, you can email me, chris@planetchris.net. If you want to see all the fun things I do in my life, you can follow me on Instagram @planetchris1.
Thanks for a good show, Chris. Dan?
The easiest email address to say is dan@daycampcommunity.com. And I work with both overnight and day camps. A lot of my clients are nonprofits, but I work with the for-profit sector too, as well too. But yeah, happy to talk with folks. Instagram is Dan Loves Camp if we're putting out Instagrams. But yeah.
Amazing. Thanks for coming back, Dan. It's always so good to have you.
Yeah, love getting to reconnect.
Awesome. Esther, how can people get in touch with you folks?
Yeah, it's info@camphire.com. So it's not CampFire. Sometimes people put that it's CampHire. So info@camphire.com. And yes, we work also with overnight day camps all across the US, all boys, all girls, religious affiliation, all the camps. We are running executive recruitment searches right now, and we'll be doing our seasonal launch most likely end of March. So find us, info@camphire.com.
So that's actually a great thing to do, Esther and Dan. So we're recording this. This is probably going to be launched in a week. So what jobs do you have? What full-time jobs do you have right now?
Yeah, I've got the executive director at Nature's Classroom. That position will definitely be up by the time this episode drops. And then we're coming to an end, but you could certainly email vice president, camp and retreat operations at Jewish Big Brother Big Sisters of Los Angeles. So it's a great overnight camp in the suburbs of Los Angeles, and it's safe and sound with all the fires that are going on right now. So
thanks, Dan. Esther, what do you got?
Yes, we have it's a VP of operations at Got Game Sports. It's also in California. So they are a really interesting camp that does day camps in the summer, but they also do physical education, and they do vacation camps like whenever school is not in session. So they're looking for a VP of operations, and that's the only role we have open right now. We just closed our other executive director position a few weeks ago. So that's the one we're looking for. If you're in California, into sports, we'd love to talk to you.
Wonderful. Esther, thanks so much for joining us for the first time.
It's great to be here. It's so nice to chat with y'all.
Thank you. I will take just 1 second to shout out another Go Camp Pro podcast. First Class Counselors is the show that Matt and Oliver put on for you as a camp director to give to your staff. It is a course on how to be a great summer staff member, specifically counselor or bunk lead, but it is an amazing resource that they put out for you. So I encourage you to search for First Class Counselors, and within your app, or if it shows up on the web, you'll find a way to share it with your staff, just as a part of their professional development before they arrive at camp. Thanks for the evening, friends.
The CampHacker podcast is brought to you by Beth and Travis Allison, summer camp leadership training and marketing consultants. Thanks for listening.
Hey Camp Pros, we love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, if you've gotten even one good idea from a Go Camp Pro podcast, a masterclass, from the Summer Camp Pros group on Facebook, at a conference, or wherever else, we ask that you give credit where credit is due. That way, we can encourage camp pros to keep freely sharing their brilliant ideas and make the camp industry better. Thanks very much.